Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, Michael people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. One of the best sports month on the calendar has arrived, and so is the latest podcast, delivering all of what is, has, and will take place throughout the universe, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And yes, there's a lot to sink our teeth into with so much going on, especially here with October. The NHL season actually begins tomorrow on the other side of the pond in Prague, Czechia, where the Devils and Buffalo Sabres will go at it. But the preview for the NHL won't be until next week, so you definitely want to stay tuned for that. NBA training camps have opened. LeBron had said something that to me blew my mind, so I'll touch on that. Of course, we have a couple of deaths to get to, which really surprised all of us on the same day on Monday with Dikembe Mutombo, Pete Rose, NFL, college football. You know I got you covered, but I have to start off with what's happening in baseball as the wild card round is now... Wait, no, it's not over just yet. There is one series left, one series to get into, and that's where I'm going to start. Because ever since this wild card has been expanded, and I'm going to leave the pandemic year out in 2020, but ever since Major League Baseball added that sixth team in 2022, which was the first year that they've expanded the playoffs, try to get more teams, try to make the pennant races a lot more thrilling, a lot more enticing for the sports fans who follow throughout the course of August, September, in those last couple of months leading into October. And what we've seen here now, 3 years running, that for whatever the reason, the Mets cannot, for whatever way, shape, form, or fashion, cannot sweep a series. Now, we know in 2022, they lost the first game to San Diego. They did win that second game before getting shut out in game 3. And then on Tuesday, they were able to win the first game. And I thought it was a surprise. I know we got to go back to Monday, Met fans, and talk about how that first game against the Braves were. And I'll touch on that a little bit in a minute. But when they won game 1, and pretty much after that fifth inning where they scored 5 runs, trailing 4-3 to where they led 8-4, and from that point on, it was just a rocking chair type of game, something that the Met fan rarely even witnesses this time of year. So for us to just kind of kick back and say, wow, after what happened there Monday, flying from Atlanta, playing a doubleheader to go to Milwaukee, quick turnaround, and then slow out of the gate. They were down 2-0. They came back with 3 runs, down 4-3, etc. I'm thinking, could it be this easy? And then you get to yesterday where they had a 3-2 lead, and you're thinking to yourselves, really it was 3-1, but the Brewers did get another run to inch closer. Mets had an opportunity there in the 6th inning with the bases loaded. And listen, Jose Iglesias, I understand he struck out and he was screwed into the ground on that last swing and a miss, but the guy's been money. The guy's been clutch. He can't deliver every single at-bat. So now as you get to the 8th inning with Phil Maton, and I get it, he has a pedigree there, won a World Series with the Astros a couple of years ago, and he's a guy that hasn't really worked. Did pitch on Monday afternoon where the Mets had that 6-3 lead in the 8th inning against the Braves, and then he started to slowly but surely give it back. I get it that Edwin Diaz came in, and everything just imploded from that point on until you got to the 9th inning there with the heroics of Francisco Lindor. But Maton did not deliver. He, for whatever the reason, left a pitch up and out of the strike zone to where Jackson Chourio, who started off the scoring in the game last night with a home run, punctuated with another home run to tie the game. And then after a base hit by Willy Adames, you had Garrett Mitchell hit a home run over the right center field wall. And at that point, you just knew it because Devin Williams, who's a very good closer, came in 1-2-3, 9th inning. And now here we are staring at a decisive game 3. And again, the Mets are the only team because all the other series in the wild card round, go back and look, they've all been sweeps except when the Mets participate. 3-game series against San Diego. And then last night, when you're thinking 3-2, where San Diego was up 5-1 on the Braves, and knowing that the Mets were going to be the other team that would try to sweep, considering what we saw with Detroit and Kansas City over Houston and Baltimore, and you know I'm going to unpack that. But for whatever the reason, the Mets cannot seem to put the hammer down. And I understand 2 years ago they had no choice but to win the next 2 games in order for them to advance, and we know what happened there. But for last night, they came relatively close. It wasn't as if this was in the 9th inning where it all fell apart for the Mets. Bad loss. Yes, a tough loss, but I don't think it's a debilitating loss. It wasn't like the Braves there in Game 1 of that doubleheader on Monday, where although they had the safety net of Game 2 and you knew the Mets weren't going to play a ton of their starters, and it wasn't going to be a scenario where it was going to be all out for the Mets to play. They knew that they had to already clinch the wild card spot and get to prepare for a celebration afterwards before flying to Milwaukee. So you knew the Braves were going to win that game. But here we are. Tonight is going to be fascinating to say the least. It's going to be theater. It's going to be drama. Hopefully it's nothing like we saw there 2 years ago at Citi Field, where Joe Musgrove just mowed the Mets down. They didn't have a shot, one hit throughout the whole game, and Buck trying to show up a little gamesmanship with Musgrove and checking the ball and all that stuff. And that's just a memory that I don't even want to think about, because that was the last time that the Mets were in the postseason. And I want to see them perform tonight to where this magic carpet ride. And yes, let's go back to Monday quickly, to where the Mets were down 3-0 in the game thanks to Spencer Schwellenbach, who just mowed the Mets down the whole year, even going back to those 2 games earlier on in the season. What did he pitch? 21 innings against the Mets and gave up 1 run? Seriously? Really? So then the Mets had that uprising there in the 8th inning, 6 runs, where the rally seemed to just punctuate around guys like Brandon Nimmo, who had the 2-run homer there at 4-3 to really look like it was going to cement the victory for the Mets at that time. But Jose Iglesias, to me, had the biggest hit in that inning. And the Mets with that just, I thought, miraculous, because it looked like they were just going to go meekly into the second game. And then we had to sweat, pins, needles, etc. to try to win a game where we thought we probably would have won, considering the Braves would have taken the game off. But you never know. They are the Mets, but they were able to prevail, even with that meltdown there in the bottom of the 8th with Maton and Diaz and the Ozzie Albies, who that guy is a winning clutch player, had the bases clearing double, 7-6, and you're thinking, oh, geez, are the Mets going to be able to win this game? And sure enough, our MVP, who's going to be second in the MVP this year behind Shohei Ohtani, but for Francisco Lindor to hit that home run, and I understand it was off of Pierce Johnson, but he hits that home run. They go into the bottom of the 9th, and even with Edwin Diaz, who I thought, first guess, I thought should have been out. And I understand you're paying this guy $20 million a year. He pitched 25 pitches the day before, 26 in Milwaukee, and he had to go out there in the 9th, but he wanted to go out there, and kudos to not only he, but also the manager, because Carlos Mendoza had to come out there with runners on first and second and had to corral him to say, are you going to make it, or are you going to pull us through the fire here, because I'm counting on you? And sure enough, Diaz said, yes, leave me in, coach or manager. And next thing you know, he got the ground ball from d'Arnaud. Mets win. Diaz spikes his glove to the Truist Field turf, and the Mets were able to clinch a wild card spot, which was one of the just craziest endings of a game that you've ever seen, one of the biggest home runs in Met history. And let's see if that magic carpet ride from Atlanta to Milwaukee, Game 1, and yeah, last night the hiccup, but let's see them deliver tonight and hopefully move on to a division series where they'll face their division foes in the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, as far as tonight's game is concerned, it's going to be all on the shoulders of Jose Quintana. Now, you know there's going to be a quick hook here. Adam Ottavino, he's a guy that's going to be out of that bullpen quick. And you know Diaz is going to be set up for a 6-out save with a day off tomorrow. So it's going to be a situation where Quintana, hopefully he gives you a little bit of length. Can we get it at least into the 5th inning? Don't get into trouble early. Quintana, as we all know, he has to hit his spots. If he's not doing so, he's going to get hit all over the ballpark. And not only that, he could also walk people too. So for Quintana, he's going to have to give them at least into the 5th inning. And then from there, you can kind of piecemeal it together to get to Ottavino and even to Diaz. Phil Maton, you are not going to see him. You can forget about it. Unless the Mets are up 10-1 or down 10-1, you're not going to see him in any relief or in any big spot here, whether it be tonight or if the Mets do live to see another day moving forward in the division series. You're not going to see him. Maybe they'll probably put him in a 2-run lead or a 2-run deficit, maybe, but I don't think you're going to see Maton at all. So that's one thing I'm putting out there. But this is going to be a game that I'm putting this squarely focused on one player tonight. And I know this may be unfair, and I know that this could be maybe, let's just call it as we see it. All the onus is going to be for me tonight on Pete Alonso. The polar bear has been hibernating way too long here. You've had so many contributions from so many players on this team, even Jesse Winker with the triple that he had. And this was a guy that came into the series not playing a lot, was 3 for his last 43 or whatever it was, and he got that big triple. Yes, I don't need to see him chirping with Willy Adames. That you could spare me when it comes to those histrionics on the field. But I get it. There's that time where he was in Milwaukee last year, and I guess he was unceremoniously dumped, and maybe there was a rift between the players there toward the end of the season. Who knows? But again, I didn't need to see that from Winker, and I understand he's exuberant. He's excited that he made a contribution. But even he has made at least put forth a 2-run triple there in this postseason. Same for JD Martinez, who, as we all know, snapped a 0 for 35 streak there in Atlanta. And he even came up in a pinch hitting role for Winker with a 2-run single to extend that 6-4 lead to 8-4. Mark Vientos has contributed. We know what Lindor's done. We know what Jose Iglesias has done. Nimmo. I mean, we could go on down the line. Travis Taylor, Starling Marte. Where has Pete Alonso been? Again, can the polar bear wake up from this hibernation, from this slumber, and at least do something? And I'm not trying to say, yes, they had 2 home runs and 5 RBIs tonight, but can we get a big hit? Can we be in the middle of these rallies? Can he get a big home run maybe late in the game? Something, anything, please? And this is a guy who's going to be a free agent. If the Mets lose tonight, that's it. He's going off into the fall and the winter looking for a big payday, and his numbers have been down. He has not come through here throughout the last week or so of the season, and now here it is 2 games in, and he's done absolutely squat. So now it's time for Pete Alonso to wake up, smell the coffee, smell the grass, smell postseason. He's been waiting for these moments. He's talked about it. I want to be in New York. I only want to play for a championship. I only want to win with these guys, so on and so forth. Well, you're going to have to start to contribute. And you know what? Tonight is as good a time as any for you to put this team on your back and carry them to Philadelphia and hopefully beyond. And that's all I have to say about that. Now, I'm not going to preview the series with them in Philadelphia, or even if it is a situation where it's Milwaukee. Maybe I guess I could, because it's going to be one of those 2 teams. So when I get to the DS, I'll unpack that at that time. But as far as the rest of the wild card, I tell you, I'll start in the American League because San Diego, they look like they're on a roll. And even though they had to hang on there last night as they had a 5-1 lead and they gave up a couple of 2-run homers to Jorge Soler and Michael Harris in the 8th, but they were able to hang on, survive, and that's going to be an all-out bloodbath between them and the Dodgers, But I want to start in the American League because you had a team that was on the come-up and a team that has been there but now could be on the come-down. And I know this should be more centered on the Tigers and the Royals, and trust me, they're going to get their due and they're going to get their love. But I'll start with the Astros. This was my bad. I picked both of these teams to advance, both Houston and Baltimore. But I want to start with the Astros because for whatever the reason, this Astro team cannot play games in their own building. Think about this. Do you know the Astros have now lost 7 straight playoff games at home? Dating back to last year when they lost that Game 2 against against Minnesota. And then after beating the Twins in the division series, they lost all 4 home games to the Texas Rangers in the ALCS, as we know, because they had the home field advantage, and after losing the first 2 games, they won the 3 games in Texas before losing the final 2 games in their own building. And then now the Tigers come in, the upstart Tigers, with A.J. Hinch coming back to haunt his former team, and certainly did just that, to where the Astros were only able to eke out 3 runs. Now, mind you, they did hit the cover off the ball, but it was always at people. They never got a big hit. They never got a clutch hit. And the Astros, for whatever reason, can't win a game in their building in the postseason, which is just mind-boggling considering what this team has done here over the last 7-8 years. Now, this is the first year in the last 7 they will not make it to the ALCS, which I talked about on Monday's podcast. Will they have another run to get to that point to see if they could play for a chance to go to the World Series? Well, you can forget about it this year and give it up to the Tigers. The Tigers have just been on this, talk about a magic carpet ride. They have just been on a roll unlike any other that we've seen from a team that a lot of people didn't even expect to be even in the wild card hunt as early as the middle of August. I mean, could you imagine? And this team doesn't have a breakout star. Yes, they do have a stud starter and a one, Tarik Skubal, but it's not as if they have a lineup or one guy that would make you shake in your boots if you're the opposing manager to say, all right, we got to pitch around this guy. At least the Cleveland Guardians has a guy like Jose Ramirez. Where's that guy on the Tigers? You'd have to look long and hard to try to find that guy. And give it up for what they've done. Now they're going to play their division rival in the Guardians, and of course I'll talk about that series in a minute. So you had a bunch of low-scoring games in this ALCS, or I should say AL wildcard, where the Tigers won game one, 3-1, backed by Skubal 6 innings, and they got the 3 runs there in the second inning, which carried them on to win 3-1, and then yesterday 5-2 to where the Astros took a 2-1 lead there late in the game, and in the 8th inning, that's where the Tigers just all of a sudden exploded with a 4-run outburst to where the Tigers prevailed and now move on to play the Guardians. I mean, what more can you say about what the Tigers have done here throughout the course of the last 6-7 weeks leading into this postseason? And I thought maybe the clock would strike 12 on them. But as we've seen, that is not the case. We all know it's about the hot team. It's about the team that's playing its best going in. And how could you even argue whether or not the Tigers could have a run here to where they could go to an ALCS and, dare I say, a World Series? This is the 40th anniversary of that 84 Tiger team. Who knows? Maybe there's some magic there. I understand that Tiger Stadium, another stadium ago, and then now in Comerica Park. And mind you, they've been on the road, and they're going to start this ALDS on the road as well. But who knows? Maybe the Tigers could pull a rabbit out of their hat and get to the next round. And wouldn't it be something that if they actually faced the Kansas City Royals, because the Royals are another team, not as hot as the Tigers, but hot enough with their own MVP candidate and a one Bobby Witt Jr., 2 guys at the top of their rotation in Cole Reagans and even Seth Lugo, who yesterday pitched into the 5th inning, but did fare well. But for the Royals to only score 3 runs in 2 games, but guess what? It was enough. And now I have to put this squarely on the Baltimore Orioles, a team that won 101 games last year, a team that won the AL East, a team that got swept by the Texas Rangers in the DS. All right, it happened. Young team, first time in the postseason in forever, getting, I guess, reading the press clippings and getting a taste of what it's like to win, but not really knowing what it truly takes to win. All right, fine, I'll leave that aside. Fly out of the gate this year. They're neck and neck with the Yankees up until about the middle of August, and then all of a sudden they just fall apart. They do finish the final week of the season strong. They win 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium. They sweep the Twins, so I get it. They were a dead team walking. But for now, them to come in with the 2 games in their building and knowing that they have their ace starter, Corbin Burnes, who pitched very well, 8 innings, went into the 9th, gave up the 1 run, Bobby Witt Jr., who was responsible for both of the runs that actually won them this series. But still, if you're only going to score 1 run in the 2 games, as the Orioles did, then you're not going to do anything. And as it is, this is a team that's going to have to look in the mirror. This is an organization that's going to have to really pull from their resources and their plethora of minor league level talent. They're going to have to bring in a guy or 2, whether it's in the rotation or in that lineup in specific, where they're going to have to get a guy that's going to rally around someone that has championship experience, someone that is able to say, guys, we need to take a breath, or guys, follow my lead, because they don't have that. The manager, as we understand, he's had 2 good years, but he's not Earl Weaver in the least. Look him up. And for that lineup, which they may lose Anthony Santander, as he's going to be a free agent, 44 home runs this year, or whatever it was. I believe he hit 44. And for that offense, which we would think is going to be there for quite some time, the Adley Rutschmans of the world, the Jordan Westbergs of the world, obviously Gunnar Henderson, guys like that, where they're going to be around for quite some time, or at least so we think, until their free agency is up, and who knows if they're going to go elsewhere, even under new ownership. But the Orioles, that is just a putrid offensive effort, and I get it. You got to give it up to the Royals and their pitching staff and even their rotation. How about Lucas Erceg, who came in and saved both of these games, a 4-out save in game 1, and then came back yesterday with another save. And let's see if that could carry over into the next series against the Yankees, which that's going to be, I tell you, if they thought the Oriole lineup was going to be big and bad, we know about the Yankee lineup. But we're going to get to that in a second. But what can you say about what Detroit and Kansas City have done this year? And it's mind-boggling to think that your final four in the American League going into this weekend, 3 of those teams are from the weakest division of all, the AL Central. Hard to believe. Now, as far as San Diego and Atlanta, there isn't much to discuss. Atlanta was coming in on fumes. We know Chris Sale with the back spasms. He didn't pitch in the second game, which was a must for the Braves to get. And even as it was, you had Grant Holmes pitch perfect baseball for 4 innings going into the 5th, which certainly served them right and served them well because they did beat the Mets in that second game in order for them to clinch. But if Sale wasn't going to be a part of this rotation and you had to put in scraps there in game 1, no offense to the starting pitcher of the Braves, but for Fernando Tatis to get out of the gate with that 2-run homer, and yes, it took him 20 minutes to get around the bases, that's just baseball in 2024, and you knew that the Padres and that crowd were going to be flying. In fact, they had the biggest crowd ever in Petco Park history, 47,000, which is the quite opposite of what you saw in Baltimore. How is it that the Orioles, who haven't done a thing up until last year, that ballpark seats what, 42, 43,000? They had 41,000 in game 1, and then the attendance yesterday was shy of 37,000. What, did they all of a sudden jump ship? Did they all of a sudden had no faith in this team? That is just a disgrace if you ask me, and I hate to say it, even the Mets in 2022, in the 3rd game of that wild card after winning game 2, that wasn't even a sellout, because I'm sure the Met fans, and maybe there's a built-in excuse there, but still no excuse, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, they probably thought that they didn't want to go to a funeral there at Citi Field to lose a game 3 and to walk out of that building being dejected yet again. And as it was, that was the case. So maybe they were smart enough to stay home knowing that they didn't want to watch an execution there for 9 innings, as we saw and as I discussed regarding Joe Musgrove. So now you have a scenario where the Padres flying high, beat the Braves, and now they're going to play the Dodgers. And I guess that's a good segue to get into these storylines and preview these series before I move forward. Now, here are your storylines right off the bat. Who is facing the most pressure here in this next round? Is it the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Phillies? The 3 teams that obviously have high payrolls, big-time expectations coming into the season, and I'm going to rank who has the toughest 1, 2, and 3, or is facing the most pressure here in this division series, and maybe even throughout the rest of this playoff. To me, it's neck and neck for number 1. We could talk about the Dodgers. And yes, for Shohei Ohtani coming in to $700 million and the Yoshinobu Yamamoto, $325 million. Tyler Glasnow, who we're not going to see in this postseason, signing him for $136 million. We know everything that they've done this offseason to try to get themselves in position to win a World Series throughout the course of a 162-game season, unlike the pandemic year in which they won in 2020. And with the Yankees, we know bringing in Soto, 1-year deal, and we know the type of season he's had. Garrett Cole, who did not pitch for the first 2 months of this year, how the Yankee rotation was going to respond, and they certainly did with Luis Hill at the start of the year. And for them to win a division, and not only that, get to a point where they have the home field advantage throughout the AL playoffs, and I believe the Dodgers had the best record overall. But for them, and I'm going to put this squarely on the Bronx Bombers. To me, they're 1, and I think the Dodgers are 1A. And let me explain. The Yankees, I think, are facing the most pressure, and they're going to face pressure no matter what. Remember, last year they didn't even make it to the postseason, where this year you knew it was going to be enormous. Of course, the Soto trade being a big catalyst into trying to get themselves back in position to make it into the postseason. But now it's a situation where there are no Houston Astros, there are no Baltimore Orioles, and people can say, oh, the Yankees would have taken care of the Orioles. Well, I will say this, and this isn't based on the regular season series which the Orioles won, but the Orioles, I think they're not afraid of the Yankees. They know how to play them. They played them well here over the last year and a half or so. So I think if the Orioles were going to face the Yankees, I don't think that it was going to be an automatic slam dunk that the Yankees were going to win in 3 or 4 games. I think that probably could have been a 5-game series, but as we've seen, the Orioles, they couldn't get out of their own way. But now, they're facing teams in the AL Central. These are teams that they should be smacking up and down the field. And let me put this even to more perspective. Now, we understand it's not about payroll, because we could go back to the 2003 year where the Marlins, Florida Marlins at the time, beat the Yankees in the World Series, and the Marlins had a third of the Yankee payroll. I believe they were somewhere in the mid-50s, where the Yankee payroll at that time was somewhere in the 160s. How times have changed. The Yankee payroll, as of right this very moment, or at least in 2024, was $309 million. Can you take a guess what the Kansas City Royal payroll is? Just take a wild guess. The Royal payroll, surprisingly, is $122 million. Now, that pales in comparison to a lot of other teams in the sport, especially the teams that are left standing, whether you're Philadelphia, whether you're LA, the Dodgers, whether you're even the Mets, who have the highest payroll out of them all. But we know Bobby Wood Jr., he just signed that big contract. Salvador Perez, I'm sure, is making a lot of money. After that, who's the next guy that's making a ton of money? Can you even pick that guy out? I know I can't. Well, of course I could, but you know where I'm coming from. And then you have Detroit, who their payroll is $98 million, on top of the Cleveland Guardians, $106, where a majority of that is going to Jose Ramirez, and understandably and rightfully so, but what did he sign for? A 5-year, I believe it was $140 million deal? That is a pittance in comparison to what Aaron Judge is making and what you know Juan Soto is going to fetch come this offseason. So that's all you need to know. So the Yankees, it's not as if they're facing their old nemesis in the Houston Astros or an Oriole team that is in the division and will not bow down to the almighty pinstripes. They're going to go up against teams that either A, haven't been here or been around that often, a la Detroit and Kansas City, and a team that they usually beat up in the postseason, as we've seen a couple of years ago and even during the pandemic year, where they've beaten up the Guardians in these series. Now, granted, I get it. 2 years ago, the Guardians did push them to 5 games, understood, and who knows, maybe you'll have another New York-Cleveland ALCS of yesteryear, where we've seen in 98 when the Yankees were down 2-1 and they beat them in 6 before going on to sweep the Padres in a World Series. And there have been plenty of other matchups between the, at the time, Indians and Guardians and Yankees throughout the years. But I'm sorry. This is now squarely on Aaron Judge. This is squarely on Juan Soto and even Garrett Cole. These are guys that are paid handsomely and need to stand up and deliver. Aaron Judge has not delivered in the postseason with those gaudy numbers, as you saw as early as 2 years ago when he hit 62 home runs and did nothing in that postseason. Yeah, he may have hit a couple of home runs, but what did he do in the Astros series? I rest my case. Juan Soto, we've seen him deliver in Washington. Now a lot more pressure here in New York. This isn't the nation's capital when it comes to baseball by any means, but Soto and Judge, I think they're going to be the catalyst to get them to where they want to go this year. But stranger things have happened. Watch Soto all of a sudden get 1 million walks, and yeah, he may get his hits, but then Judge squeezing that bat extra tight, and therefore he's going to bat 179 and go 3 for 18 with 14 strikeouts. This has happened. Giancarlo Stanton, to a lesser degree, he's another guy that obviously is making big bucks and also needs to deliver in a big spot. So, and their bullpen I'm not in love with, the Yankees. As we know, Clay Holmes, the guy gives it up more than you ever imagine. So, to me, I think point number one, pressure's on them. Dodgers are next. And I don't want to hear about Shohei Ohtani now because he's going to be front and center here. And he's going to go up against a team that right now is like a freight train. And the Padres beat them 2 years ago. Maybe there'll be some lingering effect. Maybe the manager, Dave Roberts, will probably plant the seed to say, hey, remember what these guys did to us 2 years ago? They beat us up pretty good. Now let's bounce back and rebound. And remember, they're coming off of a disaster last year in the division series where they got swept by an 84-win Diamondback team. So they have a lot to prove here in this spot, and that's why I think they're 1A. Yankees, because they haven't won in a long time, they haven't been to a World Series, and they literally have a cakewalk. I'm sorry. The Yankees have it made. There will need to be an investigation if they do not make it to the World Series, and that's why they're number one. As far as the Dodgers, what's going to happen here? Ohtani, if he has a bad postseason, can you get on him? I'm going to say yes. I'm not giving him a pass, especially if he doesn't come up in big spots. Because a guy who's making that kind of money, and we've praised Ohtani left and right, but now this is where the lights are its brightest. And it's not to say he's going to bow down or back down from it. I don't think so. I want to see what he's going to do here. But if he falls short or if he does not deliver here, a lot of that is going to be on his shoulders because of the prodigious numbers that he's put up here this year and obviously in years past, but more so in this Dodger uniform, that he's going to be the guy that a lot of people are going to look at to see whether or not he's going to be primetime ready. We know Mookie Betts has, winning a World Series in Boston. We know Freddie Freeman has, winning a World Series in Atlanta. And a lot of those guys who are still in that team, the Will Smiths of the world, and going down the list, who are still a part of this team that knows what it takes to win. Ohtani does not. And even Yamamoto, a lot of pressure is going to be on him in his first start here in this postseason. So we could split hairs. It could be neck and neck and so on and so forth. But to me, I think it's 1 and 1A. And then the Phillies are really right behind them. Maybe they even 1C when it comes to pressure. They came close in 2022. They were up 2-1 against the Astros before getting no hit. And then the Astros won the final 2 games and won a World Series. And then last year, they were up 3-1 and 3-2 against the Arizona Diamondbacks before coming home, and they couldn't get out of alive, even with that crazy ballpark down in Citizens Bank. And I don't want to hear about 4 hours of hell from the manager, Rob Thompson, about the fan base, about what it's like to play at Citizens Bank. Ask the Arizona Diamondbacks how they felt walking out of that building as National League champs. So I don't want to hear about that. That myth gets shut down. Yes, it's a raucous crowd. Yes, we know about the Philly fan. Absolutely. But all we have to do is look back to last year as that being an intimidating place or a place that's tough to play at. Arizona wasn't shaking in their boots having to play 6 and 7 as they walked out of there riding high. So with everything that transpired this year, they pretty much led from start to finish in the National League East. And now it's going to be squarely on them for Zach Wheeler, for Aaron Nola, for Ranger Suarez, for Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, JT Realmuto, for all those guys to say, this is our time. Now, this National League is loaded. And even if the Mets or Brewers come out of this alive and go on to a NLDS, this isn't the American League, where it's the AL Central versus the Yankees. Or maybe it's in reverse, the Yankees versus the AL Central. Because we would think that they're going to advance and play either Detroit or Cleveland in the championship series. This is a gauntlet. If you're going to get to a World Series in a National League, any of those teams, you've earned it. So let's see what's going to happen here. To me, those are the storylines. And yes, we could talk about Detroit, Cleveland, Kansas City. Now, obviously, Detroit or Cleveland, they're going to advance to a championship series. But can Kansas City, where Bobby Witt Jr. is probably going to be the runner-up to Aaron Judge for the MVP in the AL, can he continue this good play? Can he continue to carry on what he did in this wild card round? And not that he did a ton, but he did have the 2 hits that propelled him here. Is he going to be able to put this team on his back and shock the world and beat the Yankees here in a division series? Maybe that could be a storyline, but not a lot of people are expecting that. And if the Royals get swept in the series, are people going to be shocked? Absolutely not. And same, if the Guardians sweep the Tigers, maybe there'd be a little bit of a surprise because those teams know each other very well. And maybe we'd expect more out of the Tigers. Even if the Tigers push into a 5th game and lose, you could say that the Tigers had a tremendous year. Now, if they're up 5-1 in the 8th inning and they lose 6-5 in Game 5 to the Guardians, that's a different story. But still, not a lot of people are going to be surprised. But now as I preview these series, and I'll start with the American League, the Guardians, let's see what they're made of now. They had a surprising regular season, more so than I could ever even think of, with a new manager, Stephen Vogt, with no Shane Bieber, and the rotation, they had to piece it together. Yes, they do have a very good bullpen that's led by Emmanuel Clase, and let's see what he's going to be made of here in this postseason. But the lineup, which is led by Jose Ramirez, we know that they have a lot of pesky guys in that lineup, the Josh Naylors, the Stephen Kwans, guys that may not jump out of the page, but they are grinders. They are guys that are going to not throw at-bats away. And let's see whether or not they're going to be able to do so in this round against a Tiger team that they're unstoppable at this moment. Now, they're not going to face Tarek Skubal until Monday because of the way the schedule breaks down here for the Division Series, especially for the American League. They're playing Saturday, but then a day off, and they're going to play on Monday. So Skubal's going to get, I would believe, an extra day's rest. He's not going to pitch on 3 days rest for Game 1. That is not going to happen. But surprising when you think about how they're breaking up this schedule to where all 4 teams or all 4 series will play on Saturday. Then the National League will play their series on Sunday. Then on Monday, you're going to have the 2 or 2 division series play. Then a day off again where the National League comes back. And then it's just weird how their schedule breaks down. And I don't want to hear any excuses if the Yankees play 2 games in 9 days or 10 days, whatever it is, and they're thrown out of rhythm. And next thing you know, you have the Royals split even and maybe 2 games to 1 with a decisive game 4 where the Yankees are trying to get out alive out of Kansas City. Well, that we'll have to wait and see. But how I'm going to look at it here, I know the Tigers are hot, and I don't want to jump on their bandwagon. I'm going to say it's going to go 5 games, and I'm going to say that the Guardians eke it out. Would I be shocked if the Tigers win? I can't even say that I'd be shocked at this point. With the way they played, why? So that's what I'm going to look at here. I'm going to take the Guardians, and I know it's reluctantly right now. I'm not like really stern because of how the Tigers have played. But let's see if A.J. Hinch can continue to push the right buttons, and Stephen Vogt, for the year that he's had, let's see them deliver here in this round. And I think if they were to lose this would be a bad year for Cleveland because, listen, they were neck and neck with the Yankees for the best record. Here they are right now as the second best team in the league. And for them to lose even to a Tiger team, that would be a bad loss. So I'm going to take them. And I have to take the Yankees. I'll give the Royals 1 game. And I know the schedule is weird. Who knows? And the Yankees are an older team. And the Yankees bullpen can be hit. And we've seen. And that could also be another underlying theme when it comes to this postseason, especially with the teams that have had the byes and the long layoffs. We saw what happened last year, where Atlanta lost to Philly again, whereas the Dodgers got swept by the Diamondbacks, where the Orioles got swept by Texas. Could this happen to the teams that have had the byes, to where the long layoff hurts them, that they can't get their rhythm, they can't get their timing, where at least the teams who have had some swings and misses, who have had some plays in the field, that carryover into the weekend, is that enough momentum for them to steal a game or even steal a series for that matter? Quite possibly, but I need to see it again. Last year, maybe it was an anomaly for those teams to lose, and for the Astros who had a bye, they were able to be fine and win a series. But I'm going to think the Yankees, for all that I've talked about, I'm going to give the Royals 1 game. Would I be shocked if it goes 5 games? I'm going to say yes right now. And would I be completely shocked if the Royals win? Without a doubt. And that's not to say that the Royals have no shot at all, but come on. We talked about the payrolls. We talked about and again, it's the hot team going in, whatever. But the Yankees have the resources. The Yankees have the stars. The Yankees have the players. And if they're not going to rise, and we know that they haven't hit in the big spots over these postseasons, as I mentioned before, we're judged against Houston. But anyway, that's the American League. In the National League, the Padres, they're going to be a tough out. I don't know if it's going to go 4 games like it did 2 years ago. To me, the Dodger will and heart is going to be tested here. We saw what happened 2 years ago. We saw what happened last year. Clayton Kershaw couldn't get out of the first inning against the Diamondbacks. And now they're going to go up against a team that's not afraid to play them. They've beaten them already. They know what it takes to beat them in a postseason series. That's not to say it's going to happen again this year. But how could you not like the Padres here? And the Padres could be, I'm not going to say on a fast track, because if they play Philadelphia, New York, and Milwaukee, that's going to be a formidable test. But I'm going to pick the Padres, and you know what? What the hell? I'm going to pick them in 4. I can see them split, and that crowd is going to be bananas. Remember, the Padres are the only team in town. Chargers are gone. They don't have an NBA team, and they do not have an NHL team. The Padres are it when it comes to major sports there in that city. And they are flying high, riding high. They got a rotation, bullpen, the lineup. I'm picking them to win in 4, and it's going to be another long off season. Now, if they get swept, does Dave Roberts, does he have a job? I don't think they're going to do that, but back-to-back sweeps, could you imagine, in a division series for a team that has won all these games and has had all the success and all the pressure? Ugh. Now, if it's Mets, Phillies, who knows? If this is 15 innings and they go through their whole bullpen, etc. Now, I'm exaggerating here. But I'm going to say, if it's Mets, Phillies, I could see that being 5 games. And if it's Mets, Brewers, if it's Brewers, Phillies, I'm going to say Phillies in 4. Because what I've seen from the Brewers so far, not really impressed. And, I've seen a lot of them here over the last week. Mets had to salvage that series there on Sunday. And I know I didn't give you a prediction in tonight's game, and I guess now's as good a time to do so as I wrap up the baseball. And I know I still got to get to Pete Rose and a couple other things. The best way to put tonight's game, and I know I put this out squarely on Pete Alonso, I'm going to say the Mets win. And I said that the Mets will win in 3. If you watch me on YouTube, on my channel, I did predict them to win in 3 games. And the only thing I'm going to hang my hat on here, the Mets, when they've absolutely positively had to win a game throughout the last, whatever you want to call it, month and a half, they've done so. Remember after Corbin Carroll hit that grand slam off of Edwin Diaz, and then the next day, which they won thanks to Jose Iglesias, and actually was critical because that game they needed to win in order for them to get the tiebreaker over Arizona and knock them out of the postseason. So that was a game that they had to win after that just complete meltdown in the 8th inning against Arizona. That was a game they won. The Sunday night game against Philly, and I understand that Mets won the night before, just that final home series where they won 2 of the first 3, and they had to hang on there with Diaz in the 9th inning. And for the Braves that were nipping at their heels, and I thought it was important for them to have that 2-game lead going into Atlanta, and to me, that was a must-win, and sure enough, they won that game. The game in Milwaukee, in order for them to keep pace, and at the time, they were a game ahead, or I believe they were just about tied. They were actually behind the Braves, a game behind them, and that was a game that they had to win, and they won 5-0 thanks to Dave Peterson. And then Monday, absolutely had to win. Now, chances are they probably would have won the second game, but the heroics of Lindor winning that game. So there are a multitude of games that they've had to win. Absolute musts. And they've done so. And that's why I feel they'll win the night's game. So that's my baseball. And looking forward to seeing how this is going to unfold this weekend. Now, let me get to a couple other things before I wrap up. Now, front office, the Giants hired Buster Posey to be the president of baseball operations. We know Posey was a critical part of that Giant World Series run from 2010 to 2014. So now he gets to be the head honcho there in San Francisco. And he's a player. That's not to say players can't run front offices, etc. But I'm sure if they're going to try to procure talent, and who knows, maybe if he has a little bit of Pat Riley in him, when they're trying to recruit players to be a part of the Giants, maybe he could throw his World Series rings on the table and say, hey, I understand we may not win next year or the year after that, but we do have a pedigree here, and we want you to be a part of our organization moving forward. Who knows? Maybe that will help. It certainly won't hurt. So let's see what Posey does there. And then Chaim Bloom, the former Tampa Bay Ray executive and obviously the Boston Red Sox VP of baseball ops, now is going to be hired by the St. Louis Cardinals, which I thought was a very good deal, but he's not going to start until 2026. Why? What has John Mozeliak done here over the last few years that warrants him another year there in St. Louis? They just should have disposed of him and said, no, Bloom's coming in, Mozeliak, you're out. Thanks for everything, but goodbye. I guess they want to not pay him off in his last year and have him earn a paycheck without being on the payroll. Maybe that's the case, I don't know, but I thought that was strange to have Bloom come in after next year. But anyway, that's their problem, not mine. I have to give prayers for Fernando Valenzuela. Not going to broadcast any of the games of the Dodgers in Spanish as he's going to focus in on his health. And if you've seen recent pictures of him, he's not the same guy that you come to know and love, especially when he had that baby-faced 20-year-old coming into the major leagues in 1981, took the baseball landscape by storm. And we know how much he means to LA, what he means to that organization, not only as a player, and I know he bounced around, pitched for the Padres and a couple other teams, but for Valenzuela, all the prayers go out to him and a speedy recovery. But now, and this could be a podcast unto itself, but I'll try to keep this as brief as possible because I know I'm going to go well over an hour here on this podcast. Shockingly to find out that Monday night, Pete Rose, and my wife said, oh, sorry to hear, sports not having a good day. I said, what? Of course, Dikembe Mutombo early in the day, and I'll get to him later. But he said, she told me that Pete Rose died. I said, oh my goodness. Didn't know he was having health issues. I believe he was at a card show in Nashville the day before with some of his former teammates on the Reds and didn't hear anything as far as his health declining or maybe having a scare where Rose had to be admitted into a hospital for whatever. It was just rather sudden, if you ask me. And maybe this was something that has been going on but has been hidden. But 83 years of age, and we know Pete Rose's story. And the one thing I'll share about Pete Rose, I was not going to say introduced to baseball by Pete Rose, but I will say this. As a boy growing up, as early as 3 years old, now that's 1972, I used to mimic Lindsey Nelson in particular. He had that very distinct voice who did the Met games at that time. And I used to mimic Lindsey Nelson as early as 3 years old as if I was doing play-by-play in front of a Fisher-Price record set, which is weird, and I know it's going to be... I don't have enough time to unpack that. Maybe sometime down the road I will. But I used to mimic, again, Lindsey Nelson, and that's how I became a Met fan, thanks to my great-grandfather as well. But in 1973, this is before I even was a kindergartner, and I'll never forget my mom watching Mets Reds 1973 NLCS and how Pete Rose, Bud Harrelson, they got into the big fight there, right there at second base as he tried to break up a double play, and my mom was cursing at Pete Rose. And here I am as a boy, 4 years old, watching this, and yeah, I don't have like a complete... Now, I remember her going crazy, and I remember on the screen just a lot of dust and players just running onto the field, and I was just kind of fascinated. And even at 4 years old, it's not as if I remember vividly, like, oh my God, that's Buddy Harrelson, that's Pete Rose. Oh wow, the Mets are vying for a chance to go to a World Series. But because she was cursing at the TV and because she was yelling at Pete Rose, and it's funny, I haven't spoken to her since his death, and I know I got to reach out to her to kind of unpack that and discuss. But that was one of my first baseball memories. And Pete Rose, following his career, we know about the 44-game hitting streak in 77 where, yes, Gene Garber, a lot of controversy, not trying to at least challenge him to at least try to earn his 45th straight hit as he was trying to pursue Joe DiMaggio's unconscionable and unhittable, and really, I shouldn't say unhittable, but unreachable 56-game hitting streak. And then Rose, we know how much of a winner he is, the nickname Charlie Hustle, the guy that if you could embody a baseball player, maybe not because of his short stature and maybe not his, if you dreamt of a baseball player, that's not the guy you want to have. But if you want the DNA, the makeup, and just the all-out will to win, and baseball players don't really have that. There's very few. Derek Jeter was one who had that assassin DNA profile. That was Pete Rose. And we can look at the other sports. Michael Jordan had it. Kobe Bryant had it. Tiger Woods had it. You want to say to a certain extent, maybe he doesn't exude that on the field, but Patrick Mahomes, guys like that, Tom Brady. But Pete Rose, he was that guy. And we could talk about the gambling. We could talk about all that. Unfortunately for him, he made his bed. Now he has to lie in it. And we understand he tried to evade all that. Oh, I never bet on baseball, so on and so forth. And then had his mea culpa, a decade and a half later, which obviously was way too late. But Rose, we know, he was a complicated person in that regard, polarizing. One that if he was on your team, you loved him, but if he was on the opposing team, you hated him. But the guy was a winner. The guy's a Hall of Famer. There's no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. But he's not going to probably have his day in Cooperstown. Obviously, he's not going to be alive to see it. But for Pete Rose, I have good thoughts of him on the baseball diamond, and obviously not so good thoughts off of it. We could talk about even the salacious stories about dating that underage girl many moons ago. I mean, yes, Pete Rose was not a guy that was one of nature's noblemen. He pretty much danced to his own beat, and we saw that throughout the course, not only of his playing days, but also post days, always in Vegas, signing bats, balls, cards. He tried to make money however he could because his day in Cooperstown was not going to come, and who knows if it's ever going to come posthumously. So for Pete Rose, I have to say, thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to his sons, family, the Reds, Phillies, Major League Baseball. Baseball did lose a guy that certainly, I'm sure a lot of teams wish that they would have, in a one who was a gamer, a guy who would go through a brick wall to win, as you saw that even in the 70 All-Star game where he ran over Ray Fosse at home plate in Riverfront Stadium. Again, an exhibition game, and broke his collarbone. So that's it there for Pete Rose, and that's it for baseball as I move it along. I know it took a lot there for the start. But now let me pivot and put on the helmet and shoulder pads and go through the NFL. Before I even get to the schedule, I know the big story this week was Davante Adams, as now it looks like he's going to get traded here. He wants to play for a contender, a winning team, has a wish list. The two teams on that list, shocker, the Jets and the Saints, to be reunited with his former quarterback in Green Bay and one Aaron Rodgers, and another former quarterback in college at Fresno State and one Derek Carr. Now, here's how I look at it. Jets, they could certainly use him, but I don't know if that's going to be enough, considering that their offense has not really clicked. All right, we could say a little bit there on the Thursday night game against the New England Patriots, but again, they are the Patriots. And even though they were sort of tooth and nail against the Tennessee Titans, but again, they are the Titans. But now, as they get into the teeth of the schedule, where they got to go to London to play a 4-0 team in the Minnesota Vikings, and then after that, they're going to have to play the Buffalo Bills on a Monday night, I believe. And then after that, they're going to have to play the Steelers on a Sunday night. So, very tricky schedule. And I don't know if Adams could come with his cape swooping in and to be the ills of all the Jets' offensive woes. But I don't know if he's going to be enough for this Jet team to get to where they want to go, which right now is looking at 10-6, 10-7, 11-6 at best, if that. And Rodgers, I know a lot of the talk with he and Salah this week, that everything's fine, dandy, but it's only, week 4? Let's see when we get to week 8, 9, and maybe even 13, 14 before we can really take a look at what the makeup of this team is going to be like. And then the Saints. All right, the division could be gettable where Tampa's 3-1, the Falcons are 2-2, and they kick off the schedule tonight in a pretty good game when you think about it, which has a lot of early season implications when it comes to the division. But is New Orleans a place you want to go, even though you want to reunite with Derek Carr? Now, they could use a receiver, absolutely, but the Saints aren't going anywhere. They're not going to go deep into the playoffs and get to a Super Bowl. Absolutely not. So I don't think that's the case. Dallas, I know that's a team that's also been brought up. How's he going to go to a team that I understand they're hurting in wide receiver? Brandon Cooks is going to be out. They only really have CeeDee Lamb as a guy that they can really rely on. But how are you going to pair Davante Adams with CeeDee Lamb? You know that Davante's going to want to get the ball. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb just got paid. He's going to want to get the ball. Dak Prescott, it's not as if this is Air Coryell, the Chargers back in the 70s, or we're not talking about the Marx Brothers of Duper and Clayton with Dan Marino back in the 80s. So, I don't see that happening. Far from it. So, where else is he going to go? Is Kansas City even a thought? A lot of people thought maybe, they need a wide receiver. Now, if Mark Davis, the owner of the team, is going to be that dumb to trade him in the division, then the Raiders, they should just pack up and move back to Oakland or move to another city or just Mark Davis sell the team. That's all there is to it. So how I look at it is that it's either going to be Jets or Saints before the trade deadline at the end of the month. And to me, although that's an upgrade, but Davante, I want to go on a winner, contender, far from it. And if you want to say the Ravens to throw them in the mix, the Raven offense is centered more around their running game and the tight ends. Yes, he does throw the wide receivers every so often, but come on, that Raven offense is predictable as can be. When is the last time have you had in the Lamar Jackson era a guy that's had close to 100 catches, wide receiver that is, 100 catches, well over 1,000 yards, and close to double digits, if not double digits in touchdowns? I'm waiting. Still waiting. Why would it change? Odell Beckham Jr. was supposed to be that guy last year. What did he do? He was a decoy. Davante Adams would be a decoy in Baltimore, if you ask me, if they decide to trade for him. So that's all you need to know about the Ravens. So that's the story. And how I look at this is wake me up when he gets traded and where he goes, and I'll assess it then. Because I don't want to hear, this team's looking to get him. Now the rumor has it this. No. I don't want to hear it. Just wake me up when it's all said and done. And speaking of which, there's been now Tyreek Hill. Now, thankfully, he squashed all that, saying that he's happy in Miami. He loves the team. He called it a beautiful team. That if the NFL, and he called it a business, which it is, whatever happens, happens, but he wants to stay in Miami. And kudos to him, because there's been a lot of talk now with Rashee Rice possibly being out for the rest of the year in Kansas City with a torn ACL. Maybe there could be a reunion of Tyreek going back to the Chiefs for the remainder of this year as the weapon that they desperately need as they're winning these games. They're 4-0, but they're not blowing teams out or really dominating in these games, whether it be the opening night against Baltimore, whether it be this past week against the Chargers as they were down 10-0 and they won 17-10. And Travis Kelce, let's face it, he's starting to become a relic right in front of our eyes. So yeah, he may have his games and his moments, but he's not going to be that dominant force that we've seen here throughout the course of his Hall of Fame career. So they're going to have to bring in somebody. I don't know if Tyreek Hill, whatever they're going to do, they're going to have to do something with contracts because he's going to make, for the next 3 years, $30 million a year. How that fits in with Patrick Mahomes and to a lesser degree, Travis Kelce, as well as the contract they gave Chris Jones, go on down the list. I don't know if that's going to be a fit for the Chiefs here for the remainder of the season and beyond. And then Von Miller, what happened to him? Von Miller, to me, that signing in Buffalo, I know he got hurt last year, etc., but now he got suspended 4 games for violating the personal conduct policy stemming from an incident, an alleged assault on his pregnant girlfriend. And Von Miller, let's face it, he's been in the league since 2011. Yes, we know he is probably a borderline Hall of Fame. I don't have these stats in front of me. Maybe he'll probably get there one day. Super Bowl MVP, as we know. But for Miller, that hasn't worked out in Buffalo. And I know he hasn't stayed healthy, etc., but if I was the Bills, and I know they gave him a very good contract, I don't know how much guaranteed, but I remember it was 6 for $140, which I thought was just insane at that time, but he's going to be sitting out for 4 games, so who knows what's going to happen there. But as far as the schedule this week, we talked about Tampa and Atlanta to start us off here. All right, not the sexiest of matchups, but again, if Atlanta wins, they'll be right in the mix there for a division and have a tiebreaker over Tampa. And it's weird. This is, to me, I think it's almost a must-win for Atlanta in this regard. Not only because it's Tampa and they lead them in the division, but Atlanta will have played 5 games. Do you know they've already played, after tonight, 4 at home? I mean, think about that. 4 games at home already. The only one road game was in Philadelphia on that Monday night. So the Falcons, they're going to need to win this game. They beat the Saints last week in that last-second field goal. And that's why it's also imperative because not only with 4 of their 9 home games already in the books, but they'll already have a tiebreaker over New Orleans and Tampa if they win tonight. So at least that's one to watch. You do have a couple of good games on the schedule, but they're in the 1 o'clock window, which is weird. Highlighted by Baltimore at Cincinnati. Must for Cincinnati to win this game. This is going to be more squarely on Cincinnati and the Bengals to win this game as it is. Joe Burrow has come out to say that he is going to aim to be damn near perfect in this game against the Ravens. Well, that obviously we'll have to wait and see. But for Baltimore, who now seems to get their season on the tracks with a big win there Sunday night against the Bills. Now they're 2-2. And let's see if they could really put a stranglehold, not necessarily on the division, but really bury the Bengals to put them at 1-4 behind a 3-2 Raven team and maybe even a 4-1 Steeler team in the division where the Steelers will play the Cowboys Sunday night, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But as far as the rest of the schedule, the other one is Buffalo at Houston, so you're going to have Stephon Diggs reuniting with his former team, although it's not in Buffalo. Obviously, it's down in Houston, so for that matchup at 1 o'clock, that's going to be a good test for the Texans, and the Bills will try to wipe the stench off of that Sunday night loss against the Ravens. That's going to be a 1 o'clock game to watch with C.J. Stroud, so that could have some big-time playoff implications down the road, especially if they're both division winners, so certainly a game to certainly keep an eye on. But your 4 o'clock window, Vegas at Denver, Arizona at San Francisco. And I think the highlight games are Green Bay at the Rams, and the Rams are now a mash unit, as we know. And Giants at Seattle, spare me of those games. So 4 o'clock, you can forget about. The rest of the 1 o'clock, not really great. Obviously, Jets and Minnesota over breakfast at 9:30 on NFL Network, where Jets and Vikings will square off. Carolina at Chicago, Miami at New England, Cleveland at Washington, only for Jaden Daniels, I get it, but Cleveland, Indy at Jacksonville, this is do or die for Jacksonville. They lose this game and go 0-5. Who knows if Doug Peterson's going to survive this. So let's see if they're going to have any pride for that game. And that is your schedule there, where you have your first round of byes here. Detroit, Tennessee, Philadelphia, and the Chargers. Sunday night has Dallas at Pittsburgh, which to me loses a little bit of luster because you're not going to have Dexter Lawrence there. You may not have Micah Parsons. You're not going to have Brandon Cooks. So you're going to have two key contributors of their defense, maybe not even suit up, where you have Trayvon Diggs is going to be the only guy that's going to be of any note on their defense. And then offensively, you're going to lose another wide receiver, so they may double team CeeDee Lamb, although they'll probably play a lot of zone. Who knows? It's not going to be a lot of Cowboys Steelers. Yes, we can reminisce about the Super Bowls and even in recent memory how they played a lot of close games dating back to 2004, Ben Roethlisberger's rookie year, where they got that fumble, if you remember, Vinny Testaverde, late in the game, no business winning the game, and then Jerome Bettis walked in on a touchdown to win 24-20. Then you had that crazy game in 08 where the Steelers were down 13-6. They came back to tie, and then Romo throws an interception to where Deshae Townsend takes it back to the house, and they lose 20-13 there in Pittsburgh. 2012, another crazy game where it went down to the wire, even into overtime, where Ben Roethlisberger threw an interception to Brandon Carr, and I don't know if it was Antonio Brown. He also had a big fumble in that game late in that fourth quarter, but for Brandon Carr to get the interception, and then also the Steelers tried a fake field goal, I remember in that game, which to me made no sense, but the Cowboys prevailed there in a close game in 2012. 2016, the fake spike and that was a wild game. That was a great game. That was actually Dak Prescott's rookie year and Ezekiel Elliott, to where that was mano-a-mano, a lot of questionable two-point conversions there by Tomlin, who had that two-point conversion phase that he just went haywire over early in the game, missed a couple of those, which turned out to be critical late in the game. And then they had the fake spike, let me speak here, JAYREELZ, with Antonio Brown. They got the touchdown to take a 30-29 lead with about 40-something seconds to go. And then they had a terrible penalty off the kick to where the Cowboys got the ball to 40, and then they scored a touchdown there. And even in the last-ditch effort, the Steelers had seconds left, but they weren't able to prevail. Close game in 2016. And then in 2020, in the pandemic year, no Dak Prescott, but you had, who was the backup quarterback? Garrett Wilson. His name eludes me right now, but even he hung tough, and they had a shot to win late, but the Steelers hung on. I believe that final was 29-22, weird score, or maybe 29-24, as they had to hang on to win that game down in Big D. So who knows what we're going to get here, as I gave you a little reminiscence of Steelers-Cowboys over the years. So again, I just had to unpack that. And then the Monday night game is New Orleans at Kansas City. All right, not too bad, but we'll see how that goes. That is your NFL. Quickly with the college schedule, not as stout as it was last week. I don't even want to say this is a big game. To me, the big game of the weekend is Missouri at Texas A&M. Two ranked teams, Mizzou at 9, Texas A&M ranked at the bottom of the top 25. So let's see if Missouri could win a road game, or if Texas A&M could throw an upset to the apple cart there when it comes to the top 12 teams in the nation. Clemson at Florida State. Now, Florida State's had a nightmare of a year. They're 1-4, nowhere to be heard from. Terrible start, as I chronicled early in this college football season. But who knows? Is this going to be their bowl game? Is this going to be their national championship, as Clemson ranked 15th in the nation? Can they go in there and win a game, whether it's by the skin of their teeth or blow out these Seminoles? So that's just one to kind of keep in the back of your mind if Florida State's going to hang around and maybe win a game. I don't think they will, but stranger things have happened. But you have a reuniting of the national championship where Michigan is going to go to Washington. Now, this is going to be a far cry. Obviously, the cast of characters where the coaches aren't there, the quarterbacks aren't there. This is going to be a shell of the game last year. But I bring it up only because they are going to have a rematch in Washington. Let's see, for whatever revenge. I don't know what the Huskies are going to do here, but I don't think this is going to be any game of note in the grand scheme of things. As we know, Michigan now ranked 10th in the nation. But that's all you really have here with college football, so nothing really to sneeze at when it comes to the college ranks. So now let me pivot here. I know I'm well over an hour. I'll try to keep this as tidy as possible before I conclude. Let me get to the NBA, because I got a couple of things to discuss, and I guess I'll start off with none other than Dikembe Mutombo. A couple of years ago, he'd been diagnosed with this brain tumor, and we knew that he was in remission, and things looked fine there for a moment when it comes to what was going on with his brain. And then just a couple of days ago, at the age of 58, dies because of complications with this brain tumor. And Dikembe Mutombo, I know you can see him in the Geico commercials and other commercials throughout the course of his post-NBA career. A guy who was a dominant defensive player going back to his days at Georgetown, who I followed there, the Twin Towers with he and Alonso Mourning. Not a great offensive player, was a guy that had a little bit of an offensive game. A lot of it was putbacks and alley-oops and things of that nature, but we knew his prowess there under the rim as a rim protector, 4-time, I believe, NBA Defensive Player of the Year, had multiple All-Star nods, maybe had a All-NBA nod throughout the course of his career. Off the top of my head, I don't really know. Maybe had a handful at most. But for Mutombo, drafted by Denver in the 91 season, bounced around there in the NBA, Rockets, Sixers, Knicks, Nets. I believe was on that 2001 Sixer team that went to a title there with Iverson, Aaron McKee, Eric Snow, etc. But for Dikembe, it was more about him being a philanthropist, more about putting into the community, going back to his homeland to help out, which is now Congo, the Republic of Congo, and all the things that he did off the court, all of the humanitarian efforts that he had, and just exhausted his time, his resources, his knowledge, spoke several languages. This is a huge loss here, not only just for the NBA, but really for the world. And just terrible news, sad news. Again, 58 years old. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to he, his family, the NBA, the world for that matter, as we lost another big titan there in the NBA. And I understand he's not a guy that was an all-timer. He's not a Bill Russell, a Wilt Chamberlain. Of course, nowhere near that. But it was the stuff he did off the court that I'm sure he'd want to be remembered most than being an NBA player for as long as he played and for what he did between the white lines. So, and then with training camps opening up, and the one thing that I have to bring this up, and I don't want to pick on him, but for LeBron James, and he's not fooling anybody with these comments, and I get he's trying to temper whatever expectations that he has of the Lakers. And mind you, this is a team that has barely gotten into the playoffs the last 2 years, even with he and Anthony Davis being arguably two of the top 10 players in the league, even with LeBron approaching 40 here in, less than 3 months. But for LeBron to say that I don't have any expectations of myself or this team, that it's actually unfair to do so this year, LeBron, this is not the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is not the Miami Heat. This is not the Houston Rockets, where you have a young team that you don't know how they're going to perform this year. These are the Lakers. This is like Aaron Judge coming out and saying, oh, I don't have any expectations of our team this year. This is like, you can name any star player. Patrick Mahomes, you don't have any wide receivers. Oh, you're going for a three-peat. What are the expectations? Oh, I don't know. It's unfair to put expectations on us. You are the Lakers, just like the Celtics, just like the Yankees, just like, we'll say the Chiefs right now, just like the Montreal Canadiens. You can name any of the cornerstone franchises in any of the sports that go in. And even if you're a team that has not come out of the first round last year and yes, had a run to a conference final 2 years ago, there are still expectations for this Laker team. Now, I understand you're not going to put a record. You're not going to say, oh, we're going to be a 1 seed and we're going to win 60 games. All right, that's fine. But you could say, we're a team that's going to compete. We're a team that right now, with the Oklahoma Cities of the world, with the Denver Nuggets of the world, and yes, Minnesota made a change there with Karl-Anthony Towns, but they're going to be formidable. The Clippers moving into a new building, trying to find an identity, even with Kawhi, who still has these lingering knee issues, and no Paul George. We get it. An up-and-coming Houston team, a slim New Orleans Pelicans team. And when I say slim, I'm talking about Zion Williamson. Yes, it's all up for grabs. He could say that right now we're probably middle of the pack. And even then, the Laker fans could probably be like, what? How dare you? But at least he's being honest in his assessment of where this team could land in the Western Conference. But for him to say it's unfair to put expectations on me or on us this year, LeBron, you know better than that. Come on. Again, you don't have to come out and say, oh yeah, we're going to be a 1 seed when it's all said and done. People are going to laugh at you. But then people are also going to laugh at you when you say, oh, it's unfair to put any type of number or record or where we're going to be in the conference by the time we get to the middle of April. I'm not buying it. Sorry, I am not. You could be a little bit more transparent, and maybe that is him being transparent. If it is, all right, fine. I guess we're going to have to deal with that. He is LeBron James. We understand. All-time great, immortal, etc. But can you give us a little bit more than that? Just a little bit? And that's all I'm asking. That's it. Case closed. So that's what I have with the training camp stuff. And anything else besides that, that's what I have with the NBA. NHL real quick. I know Commissioner Bettman now is trying to get the jump on a new CBA with the Players Association, and it's very smart. He's giving it until the start of the new year for the head of the Players Association, Marty Walsh, and Gary Bettman to start, maybe not hammering out, but start laying out a blueprint for what the CBA is going to be for 2026 and beyond, because the current CBA expires September of 2026. So yes, you still have less than 2 years, but it's good that he wants to get a leg up. It's good that he wants to start the negotiations now and not rest on his laurels, and that's good for him. And I give him kudos, because how many times have we seen it throughout the sports? And the NHL, as we all know, they've lost seasons in the past. So they cannot fool around, play around with trying to wait to the 11th hour or say, wait a minute, it's only October 24, and we can wait till at least the start of next year to hammer out a deal. He is not playing any monkey business, or I should say he's not playing any foolishness when it comes to him trying to go ahead and start discussing what the next CBA is going to be. So I give him kudos for that, and let's see how that goes. Obviously, we're not going to have to worry about that for some time. And with the NHL, the season begins in earnest to me on Tuesday. I'll have a preview next week. But as far as the season effectively beginning, it starts tomorrow, 11 a.m. in Prague. I believe it's a little bit later. They had the two games. I think it's 3 o'clock and then 11 a.m., where the Devils and Sabres will face off there to start off the year. Now, as far as the over-under point totals, I won't pick any of those two teams. In fact, I believe I picked the Devils 2 years ago, and I lost with them. And I'm not going to pick them here, but I'm going to go through some of these numbers, and let's see where they'll land when I predict them come next week. So for the Stanley Cup champs, you want to start there? Florida Panthers, their number going into the season is 102.5, and I believe, let me see, is that the highest? No, that is not the highest. The highest point total of the year actually belongs to the Edmonton Oilers. 108.5. Now, they didn't really make a lot of wholesale changes. Now, they, of course, re-signed Leon Draisaitl to that big deal. But I don't recall them getting any key components or key players there for them to try to get back to a Stanley Cup final. Second on that list is the Dallas Stars at 103.5. And I have them on my radar when it comes to big-time numbers this year. Then you have the Panthers at 102.5, the Stanley Cup champs. The Colorado Avalanche, 102.5 as well. You also have the Rangers. They have the Devils at 101.5. What are Rangers? Oh, 100.5. Okay, so actually the Devils a point more than the Rangers. A little surprised there, but okay, fine. Maple Leafs at 101.5. Hurricanes at 100.5. And then after that, not that there's a precipitous drop, but then that's when you go below the century mark. And you have teams like the Bruins, 99.5. The Ottawa Senators, 90.5. Detroit, 90.5. Tampa, 98.5. Capitals, 89.5. And of course, the Ovechkin watch is going to begin. I believe he's 39 goals off the top of my head, or maybe 40 goals away from Gretzky, eclipsing him as the all-time winningest or all-time goal scorer in NHL history. You also have the Kings at 96.5. Vancouver, 99.5. Vegas, 98.5. Winnipeg, 96.5. The lowest point total in the sport, I thought it'd be the Blackhawks, 73.5. It is not. That distinction goes to, at 69.5, the Columbus Blue Jackets. And obviously with the tragedy of Johnny Gaudreau, I know that there's going to be some very heavy hearts there to start off the NHL season when Columbus has their first home game. But they have the lowest number in the sport. And my Islanders are at 88.5. That's right where it probably should be. I have some questions about this, and I'll talk more about it there on Monday. I also have a Stanley Cup final prediction. Western Conference is tough. Eastern Conference is the same. I'm waffling back and forth, but I think I have a good idea as to who will be the last two standing to fight it out for the Stanley Cup in next June. But of course, I'll talk about that then. And then lastly, you have a UFC fight on Saturday night where Alex Pereira, of course the name you've heard of, and Khalil Roundtree, a fighter that I haven't heard of, they'll go at it in UFC 307 there on Saturday night. And that is for, let me just double check what that fight is going to be for. I don't know if it's a light heavyweight bout there Saturday night. So we'll see how that transpires, and we'll talk about that on Monday as well. That'll do it, my good people. I know it's a little bit longer. Obviously got into the baseball a lot, which was the big part of this podcast. But nevertheless, you know, whether it's an hour, a little over an hour, in this case maybe an hour, 20, etc., you know there's nothing but passion in the voice, and I always deliver the goods on all the sports when it comes to this podcast. So thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review. I greatly appreciate it. As well as the platforms such as Apple, Spotify, the website JAYREELZ.com, the channel on YouTube at JAYREELZ. Please subscribe to those. Increase the visibility of this podcast. As you all know, I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. And then also, if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just the number, and the old-fashioned way to JAYREELZpodcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. If you couldn't, over the last hour and 15 minutes, if you couldn't get an idea or just even a fraction of how much I love to talk about sports, how much it's just built into the DNA, into the blood, as I like to say, where it has nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South End, to the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.